The day I discovered my wife was sleeping with my business partner was also the day I realized I'd built my own prison, brick by brick, for 10 long years. I wasn't even surprised, really. Just numb. The kind of numb that settles into your bones when you finally see the truth that's been hiding in plain sight. My name is Daniel, and this is the story of how I lost everything I thought mattered, only to find something far more valuable: myself. Hey Dan, can you look at the server issue? The site's loading slow again. Rachel's voice drifted from her office correction. Her corner office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle. Already on it, I called back, not looking up from my monitor. Always already on it. For 10 years. 10 years of, hey Dan, can you fix this? 10 years of, we need this ASAP. 10 years of being the technical backbone of Horizon Digital Marketing, the company that had become Seattle's darling of the digital space. The company that bore her name on the incorporation papers, not mine. It was never supposed to be this way. When we met in our MBA program, Rachel was brilliant, but technically illiterate. I was the coder who could bring her marketing visions to life. We fell in love over late-night strategy sessions and dawn coffee runs. When we graduated, launching our own agency seemed inevitable. Our agency. Funny how words shift their meaning over time. The server should be fine now, I said, appearing at her door. Migrated everything to the new cloud instance I was telling you about last week. Rachel barely looked up, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Great. Listen, I need the MediSync proposal by tomorrow morning. Mark wants to review it before the client meeting. Mark. Of course. Mark Chen had joined the company 3 years ago. Smooth-talking, Harvard MBA with connections that opened doors we'd been knocking on for years. Rachel brought him in as a partner, diluting my unofficial stake even further. I say unofficial because, well, that's another part of this story. I'll have it ready, I nodded, lingering at the doorway. Rachel's office was a testament to her success awards lining the walls, the custom desk I'd built her for our 5th anniversary, photos from industry events where she was always center stage. I searched for pictures of us, finding only one, tucked behind her monitor, almost hidden, from our honeymoon in Thailand, before Horizon, before everything. Was there something else? Rachel asked, finally looking up, her expression a mixture of impatience and distraction. I wanted to say, yes, there's something else. There's us. Remember us? Instead, I just shook my head and returned to my windowless office down the hall. That night, I stayed late. Again. The MediSync proposal needed finessing, and I wanted to run some performance tests on the server migration. Rachel texted around 7 p.m. Working late with Mark on the Beaumont pitch. Don't wait up. I sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Our communication had devolved to symbols and shorthand. 10 years of marriage, reduced to digital hieroglyphics. By 10 p.m., I was the only one left in the office. The cleaning crew had come and gone, nodding to me with the familiarity of people who regularly witness my late nights. I stretched, my back cracking in protest, and decided to grab Rachel's external hard drive. She kept all our legacy client files there, and I needed some reference materials for the proposal. Her office was dark when I entered, the Seattle skyline twinkling through the windows. I found the hard drive in her desk drawer, but as I was closing it, something caught my eye. A hotel keycard, tucked beneath some papers. The Archer Hotel. Not remarkable in itself, we often got rooms for clients or for ourselves during late work nights. But something made me pause. A feeling. The kind that starts in your gut and crawls up your spine. I should have left then. should have taken the hard drive and walked away. But 10 years of suppressed questions have a way of demanding answers at the worst possible moments. I took out my phone and opened our shared location app, something we'd set up years ago for safety. Rachel's dot glowed not at the office where she said she was working with Mark, but 8 blocks away, at the Archer Hotel. My hands moved without my brain's permission, picking up the keycard, room 1217. The number stared back at me, taunting. I don't remember leaving the office. Don't remember the 8-block walk through downtown. Don't remember taking the elevator to the 12th floor. But I remember standing in front of room 1217, the keycard heavy in my hand like a lead weight. I didn't use it. Didn't need to. The sounds from inside were unmistakable. Rachel's laugh, that specific one she reserved for moments of genuine joy. A sound I hadn't heard directed at me in years. Mark's low murmur. Then, other sounds. Intimate sounds. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, my entire body cold despite the warm hotel corridor. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of building her dream. 10 years of us. Or so I thought. I left the keycard on the floor outside the door and walked away. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, eyes burning from lack of sleep, but mind strangely clear. Rachel came in around 9, wearing yesterday's clothes with a fresh blouse, a change she kept at the office for emergencies. Her hair was wet from a recent shower. "Morning," she said breezily. "Is the MediSync proposal ready?" "On your desk," I replied, not looking up from my monitor. "You're the best." She squeezed my shoulder as she passed. Her touch felt like acid on my skin. Mark arrived 30 minutes later, nodding at me with that easy confidence of his. "Daniel, early bird gets the worm, huh?" I smiled tightly. Something like that. The day proceeded with excruciating normality. The 3 of us met about MediSync. Rachel presented my work as partly hers, as usual. Mark added strategic insights that, I had to admit, were valuable. We functioned like a well-oiled machine, the technical genius, the marketing visionary, and the connected closer. Except now I knew what happened when the office lights went out. Over lunch, which I ate alone at my desk, I began to think. Not with the hot rage you might expect, but with a cold, calculating precision that surprised even me. I thought about our company structure, about the digital architecture I'd built that kept everything running, about the informal arrangements that had governed our business from the start. You see, when we founded Horizon, Rachel insisted on keeping things simple. She would be the official owner and CEO. I would be, well, not quite defined. Technically, I was an employee, a highly paid one, but an employee nonetheless. "It's just paperwork," she'd said. "We're partners in every way that matters." I believed her. I believed in us. But as I sat there, picking at my sad desk salad, another truth settled in beside the infidelity. I had built an empire that I didn't own. Every client website lived on servers I managed. Every piece of custom software bore my code. Every automated marketing system operated on my architecture. I had the keys to the kingdom, but the kingdom didn't belong to me. An idea began to form in my mind. Not revenge, exactly. More like redistribution, rebalancing the scales that had been tipped against me for a decade. I opened my computer and began to work. For the next 3 weeks, I was the model employee. Arrived early, stayed late, solved problems before they arose, even laughed at Mark's terrible jokes during staff meetings. Meanwhile, Rachel and Mark grew careless, lingering touches in the office, inside jokes I wasn't part of. Once I came back from lunch early and found them emerging from the supply closet, clothing slightly askew. I said nothing, did nothing, just smiled and asked if we had any more printer paper. At night, I executed my plan. First, I documented every line of code I'd written, every system I'd built, every client I'd personally cultivated. I copied all client files to an encrypted drive, not to use, just to have. Next, I registered a new domain, redirectdigital.com, close enough to Horizon to feel familiar, different enough to be legally distinct. Then came the technical steps. I modified our client management system to tag accounts I had personally established relationships with. I updated the DNS settings for our web hosting, implementing subtle changes that wouldn't activate until I wanted them to. Most importantly, I examined our contracts, the ones Rachel had always handled. What I found confirmed what I'd suspected for years. Most were legally sloppy. While Horizon owned the client relationships on paper, many contracts had termination clauses that were never updated from our early days when we were desperate for business. The most critical discovery came when I checked the domain registration for horizondigitalmarketing.com. In our early scramble to launch, I had registered it under my personal account. Rachel had asked me to transfer it to the company multiple times over the years. I had always meant to get around to it. I never did. I worked methodically, dispassionately. This wasn't about hurting Rachel or Mark. This was about survival, about finally claiming what I'd built. The final piece fell into place when I found the password list. Rachel, despite my years of warnings, kept all her passwords in a text file on her laptop. Admin credentials, banking information, client portals, everything. I didn't need most of it, but there was something poetic about her carelessness being the final key. On a Friday afternoon, exactly 1 month after the hotel incident, I submitted my resignation letter. 2 weeks' notice, professionally worded, citing a desire to explore new opportunities. Rachel was shocked. Mark was suspiciously supportive. "Is there anything we can do to change your mind?" Rachel asked, her voice carrying a note of panic I hadn't expected. Not because she valued me, I realized, but because she feared the inconvenience. "It's just time for a change," I said calmly. "I'll document everything and ensure a smooth transition." That weekend, Rachel called an emergency meeting with Mark. I wasn't invited, but I knew about it from the calendar alert that popped up on my phone, another shared system she'd forgotten about. On Monday, Rachel approached me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dan, we've been thinking. Instead of leaving, how about a promotion? Chief Technology Officer, official partner status, 20% equity stake." Too little, too late. 10 years too late. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I've already signed a lease on a new office space." Her smile faltered. "Your own business. What will you be doing?" I met her eyes directly. "Digital marketing." The color drained from her face. My last day at Horizon was surprisingly emotional, but not in the way I expected. The staff designers, developers, account managers, people I'd worked alongside for years, threw me a going-away party. They gave speeches about my mentorship, my patience, my willingness to solve any problem. Rachel stood in the corner, champagne glass in hand, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mark was conspicuously absent, supposedly at a client meeting. After the party, as I packed my personal belongings, Rachel appeared at my office door. "You're really doing this," she said. Not a question. I nodded, wrapping my code books in bubble wrap. "We had something good here, Dan. We built something great." I built something great, I thought. But I said, "Yes, we did." She stepped closer. "Remember when we used to work until dawn, just the two of us? When we landed the Sun West account and danced on this very desk?" I remembered. I remembered everything. That was the problem. Things change, Rachel. They don't have to, she said, her voice dropping to that intimate tone I once couldn't resist. Mark is a mistake, a distraction. It didn't mean anything. I looked at her then, really looked at her, the woman I had loved for a decade, the woman I had helped build an empire for, the woman who had taken everything I offered and still wanted more. Goodbye, Rachel, I said quietly, picking up my box of belongings. As I walked out of Horizon's glass doors for the last time, I felt 10 years of weight lifting from my shoulders. The real work was about to begin. At precisely midnight on Sunday, 2 days after my departure from Horizon, I executed the final step of my plan. One by one, I activated the changes I'd implemented. I changed the administrative passwords for our client management system. I transferred the horizondigitalmarketing.com domain registration to a new account. I redirected the company email servers to my new infrastructure. I activated the DNS changes that would slowly take effect over the next 24 hours. I sent personalized emails to the 37 clients I had directly serviced over the years, announcing my new venture and offering a seamless transition with 3 months of service at half their current rate. Then I went to bed and slept better than I had in years. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Rachel had called 17 times. Mark, 12. The company Slack channel was in chaos. No one could access the client systems. The website was redirecting to a coming soon page. Client emails were bouncing. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I drove to my new office, a modest space in a converted warehouse where 3 former Horizon employees who had quietly accepted positions with me were waiting. By noon, we had confirmed that 22 of my targeted clients wanted to move their business to Redirect Digital. By the end of the week, that number had grown to 31. Rachel's lawyer called on Wednesday. I referred him to my lawyer, a step I had taken 6 weeks earlier. The domain name, legally registered to me personally. The client relationships, according to our sloppily written contracts, clients were free to work with whomever they chose. The code I'd written, work for hire, was never properly documented in my employment agreement. Had I technically broken some laws? Possibly. Had I strategically exploited the same gaps in our business structure that had kept me sidelined for a decade? Absolutely. On Friday evening, as my new team celebrated our successful launch, I received a text from Rachel. We need to talk. I replied simply, email my assistant to schedule a meeting. 3 months later, Redirect Digital had 46 clients, 15 employees, and a profitable first quarter. Horizon Digital Marketing still existed, but as a shadow of its former self. Rachel and Mark managed to retain some clients through their personal connections, but the infrastructure they relied on, the infrastructure I had built, was gone. I saw them once, at an industry event. They were together officially now, presenting a united front. Rachel looked tired. Mark, anxious. They both avoided eye contact with me. As I stood at the bar, nursing a whiskey, a familiar face appeared beside me, Tessa, Rachel's former assistant. You know what she says about you? Tessa asked without preamble. I shook my head. She says you betrayed her, that you stole everything she built. I couldn't help but laugh. Is that what she believes? Tessa shrugged. That's what she tells everyone. But those of us who were there, we know the truth. And what's that? I asked, curious despite myself. Tessa looked me directly in the eye. That you finally claimed what was always yours. It's been a year now since I walked out of Horizon's doors. Redirect Digital has become one of the fastest-growing agencies in the Pacific Northwest. I've implemented a partnership model that gives every employee equity after 2 years. Our client retention rate is 94%. I ran into Mark last week at a coffee shop. He looked smaller somehow, less confident. I heard Rachel's moving to Chicago, he said awkwardly. Fresh start. Good for her, I replied, and meant it. For what it's worth, he added, not meeting my eyes, I know what we did was wrong. I considered his words. Considered the decade I spent building someone else's dream. Considered the nights I lay awake wondering what I had done wrong in my marriage. Considered the quiet revenge I had executed with clinical precision. You know what, Mark? It doesn't matter anymore. None of it does. And as I walked away, I realized it was true. The betrayal, the hurt, the anger, they had served their purpose. They had freed me from a prison of my own making. Some people say success is the best revenge. I disagree. The best revenge is freedom. The freedom to build something that truly belongs to you. The freedom to define your own worth. The freedom to walk away from people who don't value what you bring to the table. Sometimes, the quietest redirects cause the most dramatic changes in traffic. If you've ever built something for someone who didn't appreciate its value, if you've ever given your heart to someone who treated it carelessly, if you've ever found yourself at a crossroads between what's easy and what's right, I hope this story resonates with you. Life is too short to build other people's dreams at the expense of your own. I'd love to hear your stories of professional or personal betrayal and how you handled it. Have you ever had to start over? Did you find yourself stronger for the experience? Share in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that explore the complicated intersection of work, love, and self-discovery. Remember, sometimes the greatest growth happens when you're forced to replant your roots.
They say love hurts. But betrayal? Betrayal is the kind of pain that fundamentally changes who you are. My name is Michael Winters, and 6 months ago I discovered my wife of 5 years was planning to spend our anniversary night in a luxury hotel suite with her boss. The same suite I had secretly reserved weeks earlier as a surprise. When I look back at that day, I still feel the physical sensation of my world collapsing. That stomach-dropping moment when innocent curiosity turned into soul-crushing revelation. But let me start at the beginning, because what happened next? Well, let's just say karma doesn't always need your help, but sometimes it appreciates a little nudge. I met Vanessa during my final year of business school. She was brilliant, ambitious, with this infectious laugh that could light up even the most sterile corporate boardroom. By our third date, I was already mentally rearranging my future to make space for her. We married 2 years later, a beautiful ceremony at her parents' vineyard in Napa Valley. Her father, a semi-retired hedge fund manager, gave a speech about how I was nearly good enough for his daughter. Everyone laughed. I remember forcing a smile, not yet understanding that wasn't actually a joke. 5 years went by in what felt like 5 minutes. We built our life in Chicago. I joined a promising tech startup while she climbed the ranks at Meridian Financial Services. Her boss, Richard Harmon, was this 50-something silver fox type who'd been featured in Forbes' 40 under 40 inches back, when that still meant something. I met him at company events, where he always greeted me with that same firm handshake and practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Michael, the supportive husband? How's life treating you these days? Still at that tech thing?" I'd nod politely, noticing how his hand would linger just a second too long on Vanessa's lower back as he'd guide her away to introduce her to someone important. But I trusted my wife, completely, without hesitation. That trust is why I didn't think twice about picking up her phone to order Uber Eats when mine died. We'd always had an open phone policy, no passwords, no secrets. It was while scrolling through her email for the delivery confirmation that I saw it. From Luxury Suites, Chicago subject, your anniversary reservation confirmation. I smiled. For a split second, my heart actually swelled, thinking she had the same idea I did, surprising each other with a romantic getaway. But then I noticed the date. Our anniversary was on Saturday, but this reservation was for Friday the night before. Strange, I thought. Maybe there was some special rate, or maybe she got the dates mixed up. I opened the email. Dear Mrs. Winters, thank you for your reservation at Luxury Suites, Chicago. We're delighted to confirm your premium king suite with champagne service for 2 guests on Friday, May 14th. 2 guests? An uncomfortable feeling crept up my spine. I opened the attached PDF. Reservation name, Vanessa Winters. Number of guests, 2 special requests. Late check-in, approximately 8:30 p.m. Privacy service, no calls to room. Rose petal turned down. The room started spinning. My own reservation at the same hotel, the one I'd been planning for weeks as her surprise, was also for the premium king suite, but for Saturday night, our actual anniversary. Same hotel, same suite type, different nights, different intentions. I set her phone down like it was suddenly burning my hand. This had to be a mistake, right? Maybe she was planning some kind of extended surprise, a whole weekend instead of just Saturday. But deep down, I already knew. All those late meetings, the sudden business trips, the new gym routine that somehow never resulted in gym clothes that needed washing, the way she'd been so careful with her phone lately. I picked her phone back up, my hands trembling. The message thread with Richard Work was right there. I hesitated for just a moment. This was the point of no return, before tapping it open. V. Confirmed for Friday. Same place. R. Perfect. I've missed you. This week has been torture. V. Being so close but not being able to touch you is driving me crazy. R. Just one more day. I have something special planned. V. Better than last time? R. You have no idea. I don't remember setting her phone down. I don't remember walking to the bathroom. But I do remember staring at my reflection in the mirror, watching a man I barely recognized, trying to process the complete destruction of his marriage, his trust, his future. Something inside me went very quiet and very cold. I've never considered myself a vengeful person. In fact, I've always been the peacemaker, the reasonable one, the guy who says, let's talk this out. But in that moment, as I stared at my reflection, something fundamentally changed in me. I didn't want reconciliation. I didn't want couples therapy. I wanted justice. That night, Vanessa came home late again. She smiled at me, kissed my cheek, and asked about my day as she poured herself a glass of wine. I watched her carefully for signs, guilt, nervousness, anything. But she was flawless. 5 years of marriage, and I realized I was looking at a perfect stranger. Just the usual, I said, matching her casual tone. How about you? Any exciting plans coming up? She took a sip of her wine, holding my gaze steadily. Just looking forward to our anniversary. You haven't forgotten, have you? I smiled. How could I? 5 years with you. Wouldn't miss it for the world. She smiled back, seemingly relieved. Good. I was thinking maybe we could just stay in. Order from that Italian place you like. So that was the plan. A quiet night in with her husband on Saturday, after her passionate Friday with Richard. The perfect alibi. Actually, I said, I've been thinking we should do something special. 5 years is a milestone. A flicker of something, annoyance, panic, crossed her face before she composed herself. Oh, what did you have in mind? It's a surprise, I replied. Just keep Saturday night open. She nodded a little too quickly. Of course, Saturday, our actual anniversary. The emphasis on actual wasn't lost on me. The next day, I called in sick to work. As soon as Vanessa left for the office, I began executing what I can only describe as the most meticulously planned revenge of my life. First, I called the hotel. Hello, Luxury Suites Chicago. This is Michael Winters. My wife, Vanessa Winters, has a reservation for tomorrow night, but we need to make some changes. The receptionist was all too happy to help once I provided our address and her phone number as verification. I had them change the reservation payment method from her company card to our joint credit card, the one I managed. Next, I called our bank and reported our credit card stolen, requesting an immediate freeze and replacement. Yes, please cancel any pending authorizations, I confirmed. We wouldn't want any fraudulent charges going through. Then came the email accounts. Vanessa and I used the same password for our Netflix account, and thankfully she used variations of the same password for almost everything. Within an hour, I had access to her personal email, her work email, and most importantly, her cloud storage. What I found was worse than I imagined. The affair had been going on for nearly a year. Photos, videos, explicit messages, weekend getaways disguised as business trips. There was an entire digital record of my humiliation. I downloaded everything. By mid-afternoon, I had transferred half of our joint savings into a new private account. By evening, I had contacted a divorce attorney and secured an appointment for Monday morning. I packed a suitcase with everything I couldn't bear to leave behind and booked a one-way ticket to San Diego, where my college roommate had been begging me to visit for years. The final touch? I ordered a small bouquet of flowers to be delivered to our home on Saturday evening, our anniversary, with a card that simply read, "Truth is the ultimate luxury. Enjoy your weekend." Friday arrived. Vanessa left for work wearing a new outfit I'd never seen before. She kissed me goodbye with promises of a quiet, romantic anniversary the next day. I can't wait to celebrate with you tomorrow, she said, her eyes not quite meeting mine. It's going to be unforgettable, I replied, meaning every word. I tracked her phone throughout the day. Office until 5:30 p.m. Drinks at a bar near the hotel from 6 o'clock to 8:15 p.m. Then, just as planned, she arrived at Luxury Suites Chicago at 8:32 p.m. I imagined her walking confidently through that grand lobby, perhaps meeting Richard at the bar first for a drink. I pictured them sharing knowing glances, playing footsie under the table, his hand on her thigh. I imagined her excitement, her anticipation of a night of passion, all while her husband sat at home, supposedly clueless, waiting to celebrate their anniversary the following day. At 8:47 p.m., my phone rang. It was Vanessa. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, and again, and again. Finally, I picked up. "Hey, what's up?" Her voice was tight, controlled panic. "Michael, there's some kind of problem with our credit card. The hotel is saying the payment didn't go through, and She caught herself. I was just picking up something for tomorrow and trying to use our card." "Oh," I said, infusing my voice with innocent concern. "That's weird. Actually, I got a fraud alert today and had to cancel it. They're sending a new one." "Didn't you get my text?" Silence, then. "No, I didn't. Listen, I'm in a bit of a situation here. Could you maybe call the bank or something?" I could hear voices in the background. The hotel staff, no doubt, telling her the reservation would be released without payment. "I already tried," I lied. "They said the freeze takes 48 hours to resolve." "Where are you? Do you need me to come get you?" More silence. I could almost hear her mind racing, trying to figure out an explanation for why she was at a luxury hotel the night before our anniversary. "No, it's fine," she finally said. "I'll figure it out. See you at home later. Okay, honey. Oh, and could you pick up some wine on your way back? I thought we could start our celebration early. I wish I could tell you I waited at home for the inevitable confrontation. That would have been the mature thing to do. Instead, I was sitting in an airport lounge, nursing a glass of 18-year-old Macallan, watching my phone as the drama unfolded across various platforms. At 9:15 p.m., Richard posted on Instagram a close-up of 2 whiskey glasses with the caption, "Plans change, solo night at the bar, #life happens." At 9:37 p.m., Vanessa texted me. "Got held up at work. Might be very late. Don't wait up." At 10:06 p.m., I received an email notification that Vanessa had ordered an Uber from Luxury Suites Chicago to our home address. And at 10:45 p.m., as I was boarding my flight to San Diego, I executed the final phase of my plan. I had created a private online folder containing a curated selection of their messages, photos, and videos, nothing explicitly sexual, but enough to remove all doubt about the nature of their relationship. I set the folder to automatically email a link to her parents, her brother, my parents, and a select few mutual friends at exactly 11 p.m. with the subject line, "Why I won't be at brunch on Sunday." As the flight attendant asked me to put my phone in airplane mode, I sent one final text to Vanessa. "Happy anniversary. The Luxury Suites." Chicago has a fantastic cancellation policy, by the way. Our reservation for tomorrow night has been fully refunded. Enjoy explaining to everyone why I'm not around for Sunday brunch with your family. I guess some anniversaries are more memorable than others. The plane took off, lifting me away from the smoking ruins of my marriage. I felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a hollow sense of closure. As I sipped champagne at 30,000 feet, I scrolled through photos on my phone. Happier times, moments I thought were real. I deleted them one by one, each deletion a small funeral for a future that would never come. My phone buzzed with message after message from friends and family who had received the evidence. I turned it off. Whatever chaos was unfolding below, I couldn't bear to witness it in real time. 6 months have passed since that night. I've rebuilt my life in San Diego. New job, new apartment, new routine. I heard through mutual friends that Vanessa was asked to resign from Meridian Financial after their HR department received anonymous evidence of her relationship with Richard. Apparently, he kept his job. The Old Boys Club protects its own. Her father called me once, not to apologize for his daughter's actions, but to berate me for how I handled it. "You could have been a man about this," he said. I laughed for the first time in months. "I was a man about it," I replied. "Just not the kind of man you expected me to be." People ask me if I regret how things ended, the public exposure and the scorched earth approach. They suggest therapy might have been a better first step, or at least a face-to-face confrontation. Maybe they're right. Revenge didn't heal me. Time and distance are doing that work slowly. But when I think about that moment in the hotel lobby, Vanessa standing there with her secret lover, her carefully constructed lies crumbling around her as her card was declined again and again, I can't bring myself to wish I'd handled it differently. Sometimes the most painful endings are the only way to truly begin again. So that's my story, not one I'm proud of, but one I needed to tell. I'd like to think there's a lesson here about trust or honesty or the human capacity for deception. But maybe the only real lesson is this: book your own damn hotel rooms. If you've been through something similar or have thoughts about what you would have done in my situation, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that might just make your own drama seem a little more manageable. Thanks for listening. This is Michael Winters, signing off from my new beginning in San Diego, where the weather is perfect and the women, well, let's just say I'm taking a long break from dating.
We regret to inform you that your position has been eliminated. Those words hung in the air of the sterile conference room like toxic gas. I remember staring at the HR director's mouth as she continued speaking, her lips moving in slow motion, while a high-pitched ringing filled my ears. After 15 years of loyal service to Meridian Financial, just like that, gone. The severance package folder sat heavy in my hands. 15 years reduced to a manila envelope and a corporate-approved speech about restructuring and market conditions. I was 40 years old, divorced, with a mortgage that wouldn't pay itself. Susan, the HR director, Melissa, said, leaning forward with practiced sympathy, "This isn't a reflection on your performance. Everyone speaks highly of you. It's just business. Just business." The corporate guillotine that had claimed so many of my colleagues over the years had finally found my neck. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the severance papers, a half-empty bottle of Cabernet keeping me company. The house was too quiet, too empty. My daughter was at college across the country, and I'd been alone since David left 3 years ago. The golden retriever I'd rescued last year, Max, nudged my hand with his nose, sensing my distress. "What now, Max?" I whispered, scratching behind his ears. "What the hell do I do now?" The thought that had been simmering in the back of my mind for years bubbled to the surface. A dream I'd never had the courage to pursue. Opening my own cafe. Not just any cafe, but a place that combined my passion for baking with my love of books. A literary cafe where people could connect, read, and indulge in homemade pastries that weren't mass-produced or pumped full of preservatives. I'd always been the one bringing homemade treats to office potlucks, the one friends called for birthday cake recipes, the woman who stress-baked during difficult times and ended up with enough cookies to feed an army. "It's just a hobby, Susan," David used to say dismissively. "A cute little hobby." My phone buzzed. A text from my brother, Michael. "Heard the news. That's rough. Job market's tight for people our age. Let me know if you need help with the mortgage." I took another sip of wine, feeling a flash of irritation. Michael had always been the successful sibling, the one with the thriving dental practice, the perfect marriage, the kids who were athletic and popular. I was the reliable one, the safe one, the one who stayed in her lane. The wine gave me courage. I called him back. "Hey, Mike, thanks for checking in." "No problem. So what's the plan? Polish up the resume?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, I'm thinking of opening my own business. A literary cafe. You know, books, coffee, my baking." The silence that followed was brief but telling. "Susan," he said, his voice taking on that big brother tone I'd grown to detest, "be realistic. Starting a business at 40? In this economy? The failure rate for restaurants is something like 90% in the first year. And you've got no experience. I've been baking my entire life. As a hobby, sure, but running a business is different. You need capital, business sense, marketing knowledge. Look, I'm not trying to burst your bubble, but maybe this is an opportunity to find something stable, something with benefits. You're not getting any younger, and—" "Thanks for the vote of confidence." I cut him off, my voice sharper than intended. "I'm just being practical, Sue. Someone has to." The next day, I met my best friend Diane for lunch. Diane had been my colleague at Meridian before moving to a competitor 2 years ago. She dodged the layoff bullet, and while I was genuinely happy for her, a small part of me couldn't help but feel bitter about the contrast in our circumstances. "So," she said, after appropriate expressions of outrage about my layoff, "what's the plan?" I stirred my iced tea nervously. "I'm thinking of opening a cafe." Diane's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. "A cafe, like With food and stuff? A literary cafe, I clarified. Books, coffee, pastries. I've been dreaming about it for years. Diane set down her fork and gave me that look, the one that said she was about to deliver hard truths for my own good. Susan, honey, I love you. But isn't that a young person's game? All those trendy cafes are run by 20-somethings with trust funds and Instagram influencer looks. The hours are brutal, and the profit margins are razor thin. My stomach clenched. I've done my research. There's nothing like what I'm envisioning in our area. And my baking. Your baking is amazing for friends and family, sure, she interjected. But scaling up to commercial levels? That's different. And the financial risk. You just lost your job. Shouldn't you be, I don't know, tightening your belt? Playing it safe? Playing it safe. The story of my life. I have my severance, I said defensively. And some savings. Which you'll need if you can't find another job quickly, she countered. Look, I'm not saying don't follow your dreams. I'm just saying maybe the timing isn't great. Wait until you're back on your feet. Maybe start small, sell at farmers markets or something, shows. I nodded, pretending to consider her advice, while inwardly my resolve hardened. Diane meant well, but she'd always been risk-averse. Her idea of adventure was buying shoes that weren't on sale. That weekend, I visited my daughter, Emma, at college. We hadn't seen each other in months, and the change in her always startled me. Each time she seemed more adult, more her own person. At 20, she was already more confident than I'd ever been. Over dinner at her favorite campus pizza place, I broke the news about the layoff. Those corporate jerks, she said, her face flushing with indignation. After everything you've done for them. I smiled at her loyalty. It's okay, sweetie. I'm actually thinking it might be an opportunity. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. What kind of opportunity? I'm considering opening that cafe I've talked about. The literary-themed one with my baking. Emma's face lit up. Mom, that would be amazing. Your lemon lavender scones alone would make you a millionaire. Her enthusiasm was like a balm. Finally, someone who didn't immediately tell me all the ways I would fail. You really think so? Absolutely. Remember when you made those for Parents' Weekend? My roommate's mom asked for the recipe 3 times. I felt a warmth spreading through my chest. Well, your uncle and Diane seem to think I'm having a midlife crisis. Emma rolled her eyes. Uncle Mike thinks anyone who doesn't have a 401k and a 5-year plan is irresponsible. And Diane, Mom, I love her. But when was the last time Diane did anything spontaneous? It's not exactly spontaneous, I admitted. I've been thinking about this for years. Then what are you waiting for? Emma leaned forward, her eyes intense. Mom, you've spent your whole life playing by other people's rules, making sure everyone else was taken care of. Maybe it's time you did something for yourself. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. When had my daughter become so wise? I'm scared, I confessed quietly. What if they're right? What if I fail? Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. What if you don't? And even if it doesn't work out exactly as planned, at least you'll know you tried. Isn't that better than wondering what if forever? The next week was a whirlwind. I threw myself into research, reading books on small business management, attending a local seminar for entrepreneurs, and scouting potential locations. I created a detailed business plan, calculating startup costs, projected revenue, and break-even points. I also began testing recipes, adjusting them for larger batches. My kitchen looked like a flour bomb had detonated, but the results were promising. I hosted an impromptu tasting party with neighbors and friends who weren't already skeptical of my plan. These cinnamon rolls are insane, my neighbor Pete said, reaching for his third. I'd pay good money for these. The coffee's perfect too, his wife added. Strong but not bitter. Their encouragement fueled me, but the real test came when I approached the bank for a business loan. I'd prepared meticulously, rehearsing my pitch, until I could recite it in my sleep. The loan officer, A man younger than me by at least a decade reviewed my business plan with an expression that hovered between skepticism and pity. "Miss Reynolds," he said, leaning back in his chair, "while your enthusiasm is commendable, the numbers here are concerning. You're proposing to enter a highly saturated market with no prior business experience at an age where— At an age where what, exactly?" I interrupted, feeling heat rise to my face. He had the decency to look embarrassed. "Where career transitions can be challenging," he finished diplomatically. "Look, the failure rate for new restaurants and cafes is extremely high. Your personal financial situation, following your recent unemployment, makes you a significant risk. I'm sorry, but we can't approve this loan." I walked out of the bank feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Was this a sign? Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I was being ridiculous. A middle-aged woman having some sort of breakdown after losing her job. As I sat in my car, I scrolled through my phone, looking at the pictures I'd taken of potential locations. There was one in particular, a former bookstore with large windows and original hardwood floors, that had captured my imagination. I could already see the cat's fins. Before I could talk myself out of it, I called the realtor. "Hi, this is Susan Reynolds. I'm interested in the Commercial Street property." "Yes, the old bookstore. I'd like to make an offer." I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. Not at first. Instead, I liquidated a significant portion of my retirement fund, accepting the penalty with a grimace, and secured a smaller loan from a credit union that seemed more open to my vision. I signed a lease on the Commercial Street property, hired a contractor for renovations, and began the process of obtaining permits. Only when the lease was signed did I share the news. The reactions were predictably mixed. Michael was horrified. "You did what with your retirement fund? Susan, have you lost your mind? What if this fails? You'll have nothing." My parents, concerned but trying to be supportive. "Well, it's your money, dear, and you always were a wonderful baker." Diane, with forced enthusiasm. "Wow, you're really doing it. That's brave." Only Emma was unreservedly excited. She immediately offered to help with the cafe's social media presence and came home for a weekend to help me choose paint colors and furniture. The renovation process was a nightmare of delays, unexpected expenses, and bureaucratic red tape. Each new obstacle seemed to confirm everyone's doubts. The plumbing needed a complete overhaul. The health department required expensive ventilation upgrades. The contractor found asbestos that needed professional removal. My savings dwindled at an alarming rate. I started having panic attacks in the middle of the night, waking up gasping for air, convinced I was making a catastrophic mistake. 3 months in, with the opening still weeks away and my bank account approaching dangerously low levels, I received a call from Michael. "How's the cafe coming along?" he asked, his tone deliberately casual. "Fine," I lied. "Everything's on track." "Good, good," he said. "Listen, Sue, I've been thinking. This business venture, it's a big risk, and I hate seeing you drain your savings like this." I braced myself for another lecture. "So," he continued, "Sarah and I were talking, and we'd like to offer you a loan, just to help with the final push. No interest. Pay us back when the cafe is successful." I nearly dropped the phone. "You want to invest?" "Well, I wouldn't call it an investment exactly. It's family helping family. I still think this is risky as hell, but you're committed. And you're my sister, so let us help." Tears streamed down my face as I accepted his offer. It wasn't just the money, though that was desperately needed. It was the acknowledgement, however reluctant, that he believed I might succeed. Opening day of Chapterverse Cafe arrived with both fanfare and terror. I'd spent the previous week in a frenzy of preparation, baking from dawn until midnight, training the 2 baristas I'd hired, both college students with flexible schedules, and obsessively checking and rechecking every detail. Emma had created social media accounts for the cafe, and had been posting teasers for weeks. She'd also designed flyers that she'd distributed around the college campus. Michael and Sarah had surprised me by arranging for a small write-up in the local newspaper's business section. Still, as I unlocked the doors at 7 a.m., I was prepared for the possibility that no one would come. At 7:05, my first customer walked in, an elderly gentleman who examined the bookshelves with interest before ordering a black coffee and a blueberry muffin. "Delicious," he pronounced after his first bite. "Reminds me of the ones my wife used to make. I'll be back tomorrow." By 8:30, there was a small line at the counter. By noon, every table was filled. Emma's college friends came in droves, but there were others too: neighbors, curious locals, even a few former colleagues from Meridian who'd heard about my midlife career change. One of those colleagues was Robert, the accounting department head, who'd always treated me with condescending politeness. He surveyed the cafe with obvious surprise. "Susan, this is unexpected," he said, as if he'd stumbled upon me performing brain surgery. "Quite charming, actually. Who would have thought you had this in you?" I smiled tightly. "Coffee? We have an excellent dark roast." By closing time, we'd sold out of nearly everything. My feet were killing me, my back was screaming in protest, and I'd never been happier in my life. The first year was the hardest. Despite the successful opening, there were slow days that left me in a cold sweat, wondering if this was the beginning of the end. There were equipment failures, supplier issues, and the constant grinding work of running a business with minimal staff. I learned to fix the espresso machine myself after the third time it broke down. I developed systems for inventory management that maximized freshness while minimizing waste. I switched coffee suppliers twice before finding one that delivered consistent quality. So, slowly, carefully, I built a loyal customer base. The literary theme resonated with local book clubs, who began hosting their meetings at the cafe. Emma's college connections brought in the younger crowd. And my baking, which I refreshed seasonally, became something of a local sensation. By the end of the first year, I was breaking even. By the end of the second, I was turning a modest profit and had hired 2 more employees. Throughout it all, the doubt and criticism from others never completely disappeared. There were always those who expected me to fail, who watched with barely concealed anticipation for the going out of business signs to appear in the windows. Diane visited occasionally, always with the same question: "How's business? Hanging in there?" The surprise in her voice when I reported good news never diminished. Michael, to his credit, became a genuine supporter after seeing my dedication and modest success. He and Sarah became regular customers, bringing friends and colleagues whenever they could. It was during the third year that everything changed. A food blogger with a significant following stumbled upon Chapter Verse while visiting relatives in town. She wrote a glowing review, praising the perfectly executed pastries that rival anything in major metropolitan areas, and the charming literary ambience that makes you want to linger all day. The post went viral in foodie circles. Suddenly, we had visitors driving from 2 states away to try our baked goods. Local media picked up the story: the middle-aged corporate cast-off who reinvented herself as a successful cafe owner. I hired more staff. I expanded the menu. I stayed true to my vision, but adapted where necessary. When customers repeatedly requested gluten-free options, I spent weeks perfecting recipes that didn't taste like cardboard. Then came the opportunity I never could have anticipated. A vacant storefront became available in the adjacent town, and the building owner, who happened to be a Chapterverse regular, approached me about opening a second location. The expansion was terrifying but exhilarating. I took the leap, leveraging the success of the original cafe to secure proper financing this time. The second location opened with lines around the block, the reputation of the first store creating built-in demand. It was a Wednesday afternoon, almost 3 years to the day from my layoff at Meridian, when they walked in. A group of my former colleagues, including Melissa from HR and several executives, They were in town for a regional conference and had heard about the must-visit cafe from the hotel concierge. They didn't recognize me at first. I'd changed, not just physically, though the stress weight I'd carried for years had melted away with physical work and purpose. There was a confidence in my posture now, an ease in my movements that hadn't existed when I'd been hunched over spreadsheets in a cubicle. It was Melissa who finally placed me, her eyes widening in recognition as I approached their table. Susan? Susan Reynolds? The conversation at the table halted as the others looked up, expressions morphing from confusion to shock. "Welcome to Chapter Verse," I said, smiling genuinely. There was no need for pettiness or revenge. Success was vindication enough. "This is your place?" asked Gordon, the CFO who had ultimately signed off on the layoffs. I had no idea. "It's impressive." "Thank you," I said simply. "We've been hearing about this cafe all over town," Melissa added, looking around with new interest. "People rave about the pastries." "We're very fortunate," I acknowledged. "We've built a wonderful community here." They ordered coffees and an assortment of pastries, their initial awkwardness giving way to effusive compliments as they tasted my creations. As I was about to return to the counter, Gordon called me back. "Susan, we should talk. Meridian has been considering adding a cafe to the office complex. Employee satisfaction initiative. Maybe there's an opportunity for a partnership?" I felt a momentary vertigo, a glimpse of an alternate universe where I'd remained in their orbit, grateful for any crumb of opportunity they deigned to throw my way. "I appreciate the thought, Gordon, but we're actually in expansion mode right now. Opening our third location next month, in fact. My schedule is quite full." The look on his face, a mixture of surprise and something that might have been respect, was worth every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, every penny of my depleted retirement fund. "Perhaps another time then," he said, his tone suggesting he wasn't used to being declined. "Perhaps," I agreed, knowing there would never be another time. "Enjoy your pastries. The lemon lavender scones are particularly popular." As I walked away, I heard one of them mutter, "Who would have thought? Susan Reynolds of all people." Who would have thought, indeed? Later that evening, after closing, I sat at one of the cafe tables with a cup of tea, savoring the quiet after a busy day. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Just saw the mock-ups for the third location signage. Looks amazing. So proud of you, Mom. You showed them all." I smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought me here. The doubt, both external and internal, the fear, the countless moments when giving up had seemed like the most rational choice. And yet, here I was, owner of a thriving business, employer, creator. My phone buzzed again. A text from Diane. "Hey, heard your cafe got written up in the regional food magazine. Congrats. Listen, thinking of stopping by tomorrow. Any chance you could set aside one of those chocolate things with the sea salt? They're always sold out when I come." I texted back, "Sorry, special orders only available for regular customers." Then added a winking emoji and, "But I'll save you one. 10 a.m. good?" Setting down my phone, I looked around at the space I'd created. The bookshelves lined with well-loved volumes, the comfortable chairs where people connected, relaxed, found moments of peace in busy days, the counter where my creations, born from passion rather than obligation, brought joy to strangers who became friends. It wasn't perfect. Running a business never is. There were still challenges, still days when I questioned my decisions, still moments when the responsibility felt overwhelming. But it was mine, my vision, my risk, my reward. As I locked up for the night, I remembered something my daughter had said during that pivotal dinner when everyone else was telling me all the reasons I would fail. What if you don't? What if you don't, indeed? If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Have you ever taken a major risk that others doubted? Or have you been held back by fear or others' expectations? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story of triumph or the dream you're still working toward. Remember, it's never too late to rewrite your own narrative. Until next time, this is Daily Life Stories, where every experience matters.
I still remember the moment as if it just happened. I was standing by the break room espresso machine, adding a splash of almond milk to my morning brew, when Alex, the new CEO and son of the company's founder, walked in. He didn't greet me. He didn't smile. He just looked at me like I was an outdated piece of office equipment he couldn't wait to replace. "Morgan, I need to see you in my office. Now." It wasn't a request. I had been with Next Tech Solutions for nearly 12 years. In that time, I had built the client success department from scratch, negotiated over 150 enterprise contracts, and trained most of the team that now occupied the glass-walled offices surrounding his corner suite. But none of that mattered to Alex. His mother, Dr. Eleanor Hayes, had built the company with vision and integrity. Alex had inherited the title and apparently thought it gave him the right to play corporate executioner, followed him, trying to quiet the sudden drumming of my heart. He didn't even sit down when we reached his office. "You're fired," he said, voice flat, emotionless. "We don't need deadweight like you dragging this place down." I blinked. At first, I thought it was some kind of twisted joke. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he replied, casually flipping through a stack of papers like he was deciding what to have for lunch. "You can collect your things and leave, effective immediately." I stared at him, stunned. My heart pounded in my ears. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, to demand an explanation, but instead, I smiled. A calm, polite, deliberate smile. "Understood," I said. "Have a nice day, Alex." I walked out of his office with my head high, but inside I was trembling. My teammates looked at me as I passed, sensing something was wrong. A few started to stand, ready to ask questions, but I gave them a subtle shake of the head. "Don't make this harder." I packed my desk in silence as I drove home. Memories flooded my mind. 12 years, 12. I had given this company more time than I gave my own family. Late nights, working through holidays, taking client calls while hiding in the bathroom during my sister's wedding reception. I gave them everything, and now I was dismissed like I was nothing, but I wasn't angry, not yet. I was curious. Why? That question haunted me all night. I barely slept. Something about the way Alex had said it, so confidently, so carelessly, didn't sit right. The timing was strange too. We were about to finalize one of the company's largest contracts ever, a deal I had spent 8 months preparing. I knew the client inside and out. I had even scheduled the final review meeting for that Friday, and now I was gone. Had he even looked at the contract details? The next morning, just after 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number. I let it ring, unsure if I could handle another blow. But curiosity won again. "Morgan? It's Dr. Hayes." The voice sent a jolt down my spine. The real CEO, the woman who had hired me 12 years ago after a single interview. "I just walked into the office," she said, and I could hear the tightness in her throat. "Why the hell did you pack up and leave? What happened?" I hesitated. "Your son fired me." Silence. Then, with a sharp inhale, "What?" "Yesterday. He said I was deadweight and that I wasn't needed anymore." There was a long pause before she spoke again, this time slowly, like she was trying to stay calm. "Morgan, did he read your contract?" I furrowed my brows. "What do you mean?" "He's supposed to finalize the Horizon merger today, isn't he?" "Yes. We were scheduled to meet them at 11. Jesus Christ." I could hear papers rustling in the background, then a loud thud, like she'd slammed something on her desk. "Morgan, your contract has a clause," she said, one I insisted on after the WebSphere disaster. You're not just the account executive, you're the only authorized negotiator for the Horizon merger. I froze. He can't close the deal without you, Dr. Hayes continued. Not legally, not ethically, not even practically. That contract will fall apart unless you're there. A slow-burning realization settled in my chest. He hadn't read it. Alex had no idea what he'd done, and that's when something inside me shifted. The betrayal still hurt, yes, but now I felt something else entirely: control. He had pulled the trigger far too quickly, and now the gun was pointed at himself. Dr. Hayes hung up without another word. I could feel her fury through the silence that followed. I sat motionless in my apartment, coffee growing cold beside me, staring at nothing in particular. She didn't know her son had fired me without even reading the contract. I leaned back on the couch and let out a quiet, bitter laugh. After 12 years, this was it? Taken down by a spoiled, impulsive man-child trying to play CEO, making decisions like they were moves in a video game. But real companies don't respawn after bad calls, and this one was about to find that out the hard way. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. Part of me wanted to get dressed and show up to the office just to watch the fallout unfold. But another part, the one that had endured years of thankless overtime and swallowed my pride more times than I could count, wanted to let them burn. I didn't have to wait long. At 10:13 a.m., I got another call. This time, it was Alex. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call, this one from reception, then legal, then accounting. Stared at my phone as it buzzed nonstop, lighting up like a Christmas tree. I didn't answer a single one. The voicemail icon blinked at me, relentless. I tapped it open. Morgan, hi, it's Alex. His voice was strained. Listen, there was a misunderstanding yesterday. I might have acted too fast. We need you back today. It's urgent. Please call me. Urgent. The word rolled around in my head like a marble in a glass. He hadn't said sorry, not once, not even in a fake corporate way. Instead, it was panic disguised as politeness. I took a sip of my cold coffee, still not moving from the couch. At 10:32, my phone buzzed again. This time, a number I hadn't saved in years: Zoe, a former colleague. We'd grown close back when she was in my department, before she transferred to marketing. I picked up. Morgan, you won't believe what's happening here, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Try me. Alex just got chewed out by his mom, like, in front of everyone. The conference room was full. Dr. Hayes walked in and slammed the Horizon contract on the table. I raised an eyebrow. She brought the contract? Oh yeah. And she asked one question: did you read this before firing Morgan? And Alex tried to bluff, said something about moving in a new direction and re-evaluating strategic roles, but Dr. Hayes didn't buy it. She flipped to the clause you always talked about, the one that says you're the sole negotiator on the Horizon account. That clause was there for a reason. I know. Everyone knows, except Alex. She paused for a moment. I could hear office murmurs in the background. Morgan, he looked pale. Like, ghost pale. He realized he's the reason Horizon's about to walk. I exhaled slowly. And what did Dr. Hayes say? She told him if the deal falls through, your position here becomes negotiable. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. There it was, the first crack in Alex's armor. I don't know what you're planning, Zoe added, but whatever it is, you have the upper hand now. I ended the call with a soft thank you, then stood and looked out the window. The skyline was quiet, still. I always found comfort in that, the city, indifferent to human chaos, going on as usual. At 11:15, another message came through, this time from Dr. Hayes herself. Morgan, I'm sincerely sorry for what happened. I misjudged the situation. Please come in, not just for the deal, but so we can talk privately. It was tempting, but I wasn't ready to just walk back and like nothing happened. Not yet. Alex's mistake wasn't just about a contract. It was about respect, about trust, and about the years I had given, years that couldn't be replaced by a panicked phone call and a seat at a negotiation table. Still, something stirred inside me. I wasn't a petty person, but I wasn't weak either. I didn't want revenge, I wanted accountability. I picked up my phone and finally responded, not with a call, but a message. I'll consider returning to finalize the Horizon merger, but only under specific conditions. I'd like to speak with Dr. Hayes directly beforehand. I hit send, then changed out of my pajamas and began to prepare. By the time I arrived at the office, it was just past noon. I didn't use the employee entrance. I walked through the main lobby like a guest, a move I knew would draw attention. Everyone knew I had been fired the day before. My return now was more than a quiet comeback, it was a statement. The receptionist stood up the moment she saw me. "Ms. Reynolds." "Morgan," she stammered. "Dr. Hayes is expecting you." "Right this way." As I followed her down the hall, I noticed the atmosphere had changed. People looked up from their desks. Conversations paused. There was a sense of quiet tension, like the building itself was holding its breath. Dr. Hayes was standing at the door to her office when I arrived. She wasn't smiling. "Morgan," she said, nodding. "Thank you for coming in." I nodded back but didn't extend my hand. She stepped aside, letting me walk past her into the office. It was quiet for a moment as I took a seat across from her massive glass desk. She closed the door behind her, leaned against it, and let out a long sigh. "I made a mistake," she began. "A big one. I gave my son too much authority too fast. I wanted him to prove himself, but I didn't expect him to burn bridges before even learning how to build them." I stayed silent. She sat down, her voice softened. "What he did to you was unprofessional, disrespectful, and frankly, it jeopardized a deal we've worked over 8 months to secure." I nodded slowly. "Yes, it did. I read the contract again this morning. Every word. You were given full autonomy over the Horizon account. Legally, the client won't recognize anyone else as a representative of this company during negotiations. That clause was put in place after the WebSphere debacle. I remember it well." "So do I," I said quietly. "I was the one who managed the fallout." Her eyes met mine. "You didn't deserve what happened yesterday," she said. "And I'd like to offer you your job back, with full authority to finish the deal. Whatever conditions you need, we'll make them work." There was sincerity in her tone. Regret, too. But this wasn't just about the deal. It was about leadership, accountability, dignity. "I'll return," I said, "but I want everything in writing. A revised contract, clear autonomy over Horizon, and no interference from Alex." She nodded immediately. "Done. And one more thing," I added, voice firm. "This can't happen again. Not to me, not to anyone else." An icy silence followed. Then she gave me a slow, thoughtful nod. "You have my word." With that, I stood. The moment I stepped out of her office, I could see Alex standing down the hall, arms crossed, pretending to be deep in conversation with a junior executive, but his eyes locked on mine the second I appeared. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I walked straight past him, and I swear, for a second, I saw the exact moment he realized his control was slipping. By 1 p.m., the boardroom was ready. The Horizon team had just arrived, and we had about 30 minutes before the official meeting. I reviewed the documents one last time, confirming all the points we had previously negotiated. Their CEO, Ms. Rivera, was a no-nonsense woman with sharp instincts. She valued trust above all, and any whiff of internal disorganization would send her running. As I placed the printed confidentiality agreements onto the table, I caught sight of Alex pacing outside the glass walls of the meeting room like a caged animal. Dr. Hayes stepped out to intercept him. Their muffled voices escalated quickly until Dr. Hayes's hand shot up, silencing him. Alex's face turned crimson. He looked over his shoulder at me with a mix of rage and humiliation. Then he walked away, That was the last time I saw him that day. At 1:30 sharp, Ms. Rivera entered with her team. I greeted her warmly, and we exchanged a few words about her recent feature in Forbes 40 Under 40. Her eyes lit up. "You remembered," she said with a small smile, a rare gesture from her. "Of course. Respect goes a long way." The meeting began. It went flawlessly. 2 hours later, we shook hands and signed the deal. After they left, Dr. Hayes approached me again, this time her face showing genuine relief. "You saved us," she said. "And I owe you more than an apology." "You owe your company a leader," I replied. "One who knows the difference between power and responsibility." She didn't argue. Later that evening, as I walked to my car, the tension I'd carried for the past 48 hours finally began to lift. I had come back not as an employee, but as someone who understood her value and demanded it be recognized, but I also knew this wasn't over. Alex might have been quiet today, but men like him don't disappear. They retreat, and then they retaliate. Why the following week, the Horizon merger had made headlines in our industry newsletter, Breakthrough in Tech Integration. Nextech secures historic partnership with Horizon through strategic negotiation and relationship-based leadership. They didn't mention me by name, but everyone in the company knew who had sealed that deal. My inbox was flooded with quiet congratulations, internal messages from staff who had stayed silent during the storm. Some were from juniors I'd mentored years ago, others from managers who had once ignored me in meetings but now praised my leadership under pressure. I appreciated their words, but I wasn't naive. I knew how quickly people shift when the wind changes direction. The mood around the office had lightened. There were smiles, laughter again in the break room. Dr. Hayes had made it clear Alex was no longer involved in high-level decision-making until further notice, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Small things began to happen. First, it was the expense reports. The reimbursement for my travel to the Horizon meeting was delayed. Then, documents I had submitted for approval were returned to me and signed, without explanation. Next, an email I never sent, allegedly from my address, was flagged by IT. It contained incorrect client information and had been forwarded to one of our overseas partners. Luckily, the partner was someone I had a good relationship with, and he reached out directly to clarify. But the mistake had already planted doubt, reported it to our internal systems team. They said there was no sign of external hacking. The message had originated from inside the office. When I knew Alex was behind it, was no longer trying to fire me, that approach had failed. Now he wanted to make me look incompetent, to smear my reputation slowly, subtly, until I either quit in frustration or someone else decided I was a liability. IT was classic corporate sabotage, and it wasn't the first time I'd seen it. Back at my first job, fresh out of college, I worked under a director who played the same game. He wouldn't confront you directly, but he'd cut off your resources, isolate you from projects, quietly poison your name until the only option left was to disappear. But I wasn't 23 anymore. I wasn't going to disappear. I documented everything, every missed email, every mistake that I hadn't made, every delay. I had learned the hard way that paper trails are more powerful than emotions in environments like this. I even started using a private notebook, logging times, dates, conversations, just in case. Then, one afternoon, I overheard something that confirmed my suspicions. Was passing the small conference room when I heard Alex's voice inside, too loud for a private discussion. "She's unstable," he said. "Since she came back, she's been erratic, aggressive. I don't think she's fit to manage high-pressure clients." I stopped in my tracks. "I'm just saying," he continued, "maybe we should start thinking about succession planning for client success. She's clearly overextended." Another voice responded, someone I didn't recognize, a newer executive maybe. But the Horizon merger, she pulled that off under serious pressure. Alex scoffed. "She got lucky. We can't run a company on luck." I stood frozen for a few moments, then quietly walked away, my blood running cold, not out of fear, but from the icy precision of his tactics. He was planting seeds again, poisoning the well. That evening, I stayed late. The office was quiet, the halls dim. I sat alone in the glass meeting room, staring at the city lights, wondering how many more battles I would have to fight just to keep doing my job, and then a voice broke the silence. "Still here?" I looked up. It was Dr. Hayes. "I could ask you the same," I replied. She stepped inside, placed a folder on the table. "Your revised contract, with everything we agreed on." I opened it, read through the language. It was solid. I nodded in approval. "I've also started an internal audit," she added. "Too many things have been misfiled lately." I looked up sharply. She met my gaze. "I'm not blind, Morgan. I know Alex isn't finished." "Why haven't you stopped him?" I asked. There was a long pause before she answered. Because I needed to see how far he'd go." She sounded tired, more like a mother than a CEO in that moment. "You're protecting the company," I said. She shook her head slowly. "I'm trying to protect both of you. But maybe it's too late for one of you." I closed the folder. "I don't need protection. I need you to decide what kind of legacy you want to leave behind." Her eyes lingered on mine. Then she turned and left, and I knew something bigger was coming. The office felt colder that week, not because of the weather, but because the air between people had changed. Conversations dropped to whispers when I walked by. Some employees smiled at me, others avoided eye contact altogether. The internal audit had begun, and everyone knew it. People were nervous. So was I. I hadn't asked Dr. Hayes to launch an audit, but deep down, I was relieved that she had. I needed the truth out in the open, not just for me, but for everyone who had been walking on eggshells since Alex took over. Still, I knew how this game worked. In corporations, truth doesn't always lead to justice. Sometimes it leads to quiet exits and golden handshakes. Sometimes it's buried so deep behind red tape that the damage becomes irreversible. That Thursday, I was called into the audit committee's temporary office, an old storage room turned war room. Files were stacked on tables, monitors glowed with data, and a whiteboard was filled with timelines and digital breadcrumbs. Jordan, the lead internal auditor, greeted me. "Morgan, thanks for coming in. We'd like to ask you a few questions about some recent irregularities." I nodded and took a seat. He pulled up a file on the screen. "First, this email that appeared to be from your account. We've confirmed it was sent from a shared workstation near the break room. The credentials were manually entered. So someone had my login?" He shook his head. "No, someone had your credentials, copied them, most likely. This wasn't phishing. It was internal." I folded my arms. I reported that incident the day it happened. He gave a tight smile. "Yes, and we're glad you did. We found a few others like it, emails rewritten, spreadsheets altered, sign-offs removed. Always traced to shared machines, always under your name." The weight in my chest grew heavier. "This was coordinated," I said. Jordan hesitated. "Yes. And we've narrowed down the list of people who had access. We've also noticed unusual patterns linked to Alex's executive assistant's login." I sat still. He continued carefully. "We're not accusing anyone yet, but there's a clear pattern of sabotage intended to discredit you, and possibly others." I clenched my jaw. "So what happens now?" "That's where it gets complicated," he said. "Dr. Hayes asked us to present our findings directly to her. She's made it clear she wants the truth, all of it, no filters." I nodded slowly. "Then I'll be there." Jordan raised his eyebrows. "You're not required, I will be there," I repeated. "If this is going to surface, I want to look everyone in the eye." He didn't argue that night. I barely slept. I kept thinking about the others who had left quietly over the past year, talented employees in their 30s and 40s who had simply moved on without much notice. People who had once been considered rising stars. I used to think it was just turnover. Now I wondered how many of them had been quietly pushed out by Alex's games, arrived early to the executive boardroom the next morning. Dr. Hayes was already there, staring out the window like a woman waiting for the final card to fall. Jordan and 2 other auditors came in next, then Alex arrived, 10 minutes late, looking smug, the phone in hand, not a trace of concern on his face. Until he saw me. He paused at the door. She's not on the audit committee. Dr. Hayes didn't turn. She's here at my request. Alex shifted his weight uncomfortably. This is supposed to be internal. Confidential. Then you should have kept it that way when you used company resources to fabricate emails, I said, my voice calm but sharp. Alex scoffed. That's ridiculous. Jordan spoke up. We've traced multiple login attempts tied to your assistant's account, all connected to irregularities targeting Morgan's work. There's a clear timeline. Alex's face began to shift, his practiced smugness cracking. You're reaching. She's just bitter about being let go. I looked him in the eye. You didn't let me go, Alex. You sabotaged me, and you almost tanked the biggest merger this company has landed in 5 years. Dr. Hayes finally turned. I gave you a chance, she said quietly. I gave you more than one. And you've done nothing but tear down the people trying to build something real here. Alex's bravado faltered. This isn't what you think. No, Dr. Hayes cut in. It's worse. A heavy silence filled the room. Then Dr. Hayes stood. The board will be reviewing this report. Until then, you are suspended, effective immediately. Alex opened his mouth to protest, but the words never came. He looked at me one last time, this time not with rage, but with disbelief, like he had finally realized that none of his usual tricks were going to save him now. He walked out in silence, stayed behind. Dr. Hayes exhaled, her shoulders sagging. I failed him, she said. As a leader, and maybe as a mother. You can't lead someone who refuses to grow, I said quietly. But you can lead the company. You still have that choice. She looked at me, then nodded, and for the first time since this all began, I felt the weight start to lift. 2 weeks passed since the audit meeting, but the impact of that morning still echoed through every corner of the building. Alex hadn't returned, and the once proud smirk he carried like a badge was now the stuff of whispered office gossip. The board moved quickly. The evidence was too strong, too detailed, too damning to ignore: the falsified emails, the login traces, the unexplained disappearance of files, the attempt to weaponize HR complaints, all under Alex's direction, or through people he manipulated. When the final report came out, it was clear Alex hadn't just tried to sabotage me, he had compromised the integrity of the company itself. His suspension became a termination. The official announcement cited breaches of ethical conduct and internal misconduct. No lawsuits, no press release, just a quiet exit through the back door of corporate history, but word spread anyway. Thought I'd feel triumphant when I heard the news. Instead, I felt calm, not victorious, just steady, like I had weathered the storm and now I could finally breathe. A few days later, Dr. Hayes called me into her office. Close the door, she said. I did. She sat at her desk, a folder in front of her, but she didn't open it yet. I've spent a lot of time thinking about everything that's happened, she began, and what I want this company to be moving forward. I didn't speak. I let her finish. You've shown more leadership in the past month than most executives show in a career. You protected our biggest merger, held your composure in a public humiliation, and navigated personal attacks with professionalism. That's the kind of person I want helping run this company. She slid the folder across the desk. Inside was a promotion letter, Senior Vice President of Client Strategy, an executive-level role, one that reported directly to her. I looked up, startled. I didn't ask for this. I know, she said. That's why you deserve it. I hesitated, then gave her a small nod. If I accept this, I want to say in how we move forward. I don't want to just hold a title. I want to rebuild this culture the right way. She smiled. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Later that evening, as I sat alone in my new office, a temporary one while renovations were underway, I stared at the blank nameplate on the door. For years, I'd walked these halls wondering if anyone really saw the work I did. The late nights, the client saves, the fires I put out without a single word of credit, thought staying quiet was the best way to keep peace, to not cause friction. But silence had almost cost me everything. IT wasn't just about a contract or a position. It was about remembering that competence is not arrogance, and professionalism is not weakness. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and sabotaged, but I had never been defeated. And I hadn't let myself become bitter in the process. That, to me, was the real win. In the weeks that followed, I started reshaping the department. I reopened lines of communication. I reinstated people who had been pushed out unfairly. I created an anonymous reporting system so no one else had to fear retaliation for speaking up, even made time for the younger employees who were just starting out, some of whom had witnessed what I went through and quietly asked how I stayed strong. I told them the truth. You don't always get to pick the battles, I said, but you do get to decide who you become in the middle of them. As for Alex? Last I heard, he was interviewing at smaller firms out of state, but his reputation had caught up with him. Some said Dr. Hayes pulled strings to make sure his name didn't get dragged publicly. Maybe that was a mother's last act of love. I didn't ask. I didn't need to point. One afternoon, while walking through the office, I passed the glass wall that once housed the Horizon negotiation. I paused for a moment, remembering everything: the sabotage, the call, the panic, the eventual triumph. That single merger had changed the course of my career. But the real shift happened the moment I smiled at Alex and walked out of his office, refusing to beg. That was the turning point, not because I gave up, but because I knew what I was worth, and I refused to let anyone, CEO's son or not, take that from me again. Have you ever faced a situation where someone tried to undermine your worth in the workplace? Or have you witnessed the kind of corporate politics that can make or break careers? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Your stories matter, and they might just help someone else who's going through something similar right now. If you found value in this story, please consider subscribing to the channel for more authentic workplace narratives that explore the human side of professional life. Together, we can build a community that values integrity, resilience, and true leadership.
I spent 10 years of my life trying to become a father, only to discover that when it finally happened. The baby wasn't mine. My name's Daniel. And this is how my wife tried to pass off another man's child as mine. And how I left her with absolutely nothing. I'm 37 now. My wife, well, ex-wife Sarah, is the same age. We were together for almost 15 years, married for 10 of those. Back when we were still dating, we were really big on having children. I had a lot of siblings growing up, most of them younger than me, and I've always been great with kids. Sarah also always pictured having a family with 3 or 4 children. It was something she dreamed about since she was young, so we were completely in sync on that front. Unfortunately, as you grow older, you realize that life doesn't always go the way you want it to. After we got married about 10 years ago, that quickly became clear. We had dated for around 5 years, so we never felt the need to take our time with anything after the wedding. We went straight to trying to conceive, but it just didn't work for us, which was devastating. When I say that we tried everything, I really mean everything. Even things that you normally know wouldn't work. But we were so desperate for a baby, so you really can't blame us for going all out. Well, here's a bit of a spoiler alert. It had been 10 years, and we didn't have a baby yet. That's actually a major part of why I'm recording this. As all couples struggling to conceive have experienced. There have been times when it looked like things had finally happened, only for that time of the month to show up some days late. There were about 2 instances where we actually got a positive pregnancy test, but about 2 months later in both cases, she miscarried. That was extremely painful for both of us to experience. I know I'm talking a lot about things that happened in the past, but it's important for you to understand how crucial it was for both of us to have a child. And before you ask, yes, we'd been to several doctors. I've had my swimmers tested more times than I'd like to admit. And yes, they passed with flying colors. Sarah also had many different medical tests done, and for the most part, the experts weren't able to determine why we couldn't conceive. We tried IVF as well, but that failed. We considered adoption and surrogacy, but we might be a bit too old-fashioned for that. Those options weren't off the table completely. They likely wouldn't expire for us anytime soon, so there really wasn't a rush until we figured out that we truly couldn't have a child on our own. That it's important to understand how much pressure we faced from relatives who both come from rather traditional families, which is likely why we were so fixated on having kids. However, not being able to have children yet had backfired because in traditional families like ours, children are almost a necessity. Without them, it's like you've somehow failed at life. I blame very strong religious beliefs for that mindset. Sarah got most of the brunt from both sides of relatives, though I wasn't exempt myself. Male relatives especially liked to make comments about how they'd never seen a man from our family unable to put a baby in someone. Again, I've gone through all the tests a man can go through, and I really didn't think I could be convinced any further that there was nothing wrong with me. Anyway, let me get to the actual story. Sarah and I had a healthy sex life. It used to be because we were trying for a baby, but at a certain point it just became habit, even after we'd mostly accepted that it wasn't going to happen for us. Personally, I wanted to know that I'd tried my best to have a child of my own, so I wouldn't start to wonder whether I could have done more by the time I turned 80. Since we were intimate so frequently, there was really no reason for me to suspect anything unusual on the rare occasion that we thought she might be pregnant. This time around, she missed her period and we started to get excited. But of course, we had to temper that excitement because we'd gone a decade without any luck in the pregnancy department. Why would we put all our hopes on a missed period? However, after she missed her next period, Sarah decided to take a pregnancy test. And lo and behold, it was positive. Honestly, I was ecstatic. Sure, there was a bit of doubt and apprehension that she'd miscarry like the previous times, but that worry was much less than I thought it would be. I felt like being very positive about it would somehow help the chances of the pregnancy making it to term. Though of course, 9 months is a very long time. But I had hope. Very thankfully, the pregnancy actually got to the 5-month mark, and I genuinely don't think I've ever been happier in my entire life because we had never had a pregnancy last that long before. Honestly, I had been hopeful, but there was a part of me that never imagined I'd see a pregnancy get to that point. Sarah was so happy too, obviously. I was glad to see her like that because she really got the worst part of the scrutiny from relatives, and this was like a big middle finger to all of them. In fact, I noticed that Sarah's relatives were suddenly so much nicer to me than they ever were before. While it sucked that their kindness seemed to be locked behind us having a baby, I was glad to have it regardless. Now, this is the part where I first realized that something might be wrong. We were watching a local TV show one evening, and there was a plotline about a woman who cheated on her husband and got pregnant with her lover's baby. This was a show that we watched quite regularly, but I noticed something was off when Sarah suddenly said that she wanted to watch something else. She wasn't too pushy about it. When I asked why she wasn't interested anymore, she blamed it on the pregnancy. A lot changes when a woman is pregnant, so honestly, I wasn't too suspicious about it. I eventually switched to another program, and she seemed to settle down at that point. But for the rest of the night, she was acting odd. I noticed her shooting me glances every now and then. I didn't dwell on it too much at the time, but things became more evident a few days later. It was a weekend, and the exact same episode of that show came on as a rerun. Her reaction was very similar. She suddenly didn't feel like watching it anymore. That was when I realized that I might need to get to the bottom of things. I asked her if she was okay, and she said that she was, again citing the pregnancy as the reason for wanting to watch something else. That time around, I didn't notice any other odd behavior, though maybe I simply wasn't as observant. The day after, which was just a few days ago from when this all started, I spoke to one of my good friends about the whole situation. He was the one who made me see that it could potentially be a case of Sarah feeling uncomfortable with what had happened in the TV episode because that's what she was guilty of herself. Honestly, it sounded ridiculous to me at first, but the more he spoke, the more it started to make sense. The thing is, I didn't want to accept what he was saying because that would potentially mean that what was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life was about to turn into a case of betrayal and infidelity. And I really don't know if I could have dealt with that. I'll admit that part of me didn't even want to investigate further to find the answers, because I was afraid that what I might discover could devastate me. After waiting for so long for a child, I wasn't sure whether I could handle such a revelation, so that's what brought me to my first decision point. I tried my best to notice any other signs that something was off. Hopefully you guys might have a theory or two about why that specific episode of the show made Sarah so shifty. Maybe it had nothing to do with what happened in that episode. Maybe it really just was the pregnancy affecting her at the worst times. But my friend's words kept echoing in my head. And as the days passed, I found myself becoming more and more paranoid. Some of you are probably wondering why I didn't just ask her directly. After 10 years of marriage, shouldn't honesty be something we'd established? Well, I eventually did ask her straight up. And that's when everything started to unravel. I think the exact words that came out of my mouth were something like, "Why were things different this time? We didn't do anything different, so why did it work this time?" I know the test said there was nothing wrong with me, but I've been overthinking whether the baby is mine. Needless to say, she flipped out. I started trying to calm her down because I was genuinely concerned about her fury affecting the baby. But obviously, I had just accused her of cheating on me and trying to pass off someone else's baby as mine. So even I can say her anger was justified, that I felt like complete crap every time I replayed how things went. It was very unpleasant. Eventually she calmed down, but she told me that I couldn't stay at home that day. Again, I felt like it was justified, and I thought that from her reaction, and how genuine it seemed to me, that I had actually messed up. It had to be my baby, right? At this point, I really hoped that I'd be able to get her to forgive me. But there was one thing that made me feel a bit uncertain. As I was grabbing a few things that I'd need to spend the night somewhere else, I heard Sarah on the phone talking to someone in hushed tones. The problem was, I didn't know who it was, and I couldn't hear a word. I just knew there was whispering going on. By the time I went back to the room she was in, she wasn't on the call anymore. That part made my paranoia kick in again, but I had just seen where that took me the last time. So I really tried to wash it out of my head and not think too much of it. This all happened 2 days after our initial argument. It was my second night out of the house, and I was still torn between feeling guilty for accusing my pregnant wife of cheating and the growing suspicion that something wasn't right. Some people suggested that her anger was simply good acting, and that maybe being kicked out of the house was a ploy for my pregnant wife to move her lover in for a few days. I didn't want to believe that, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I tried to be rational. She was my wife, after all. I should trust her to some degree, right? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't being paranoid for no reason. I'd had a cheating partner when I was much younger, and I knew that gaslighting comes easy to them, so after 4 days, I was finally allowed back home. There was an awkward period, but things got back to normal relatively quickly. Almost as soon as they did, I decided to use my brain this time and keep my emotions under wraps. I came up with a plan to look through her messages by borrowing her MacBook. I figured I'd be able to look at her social media and messages, and her laptop would give me more time to search than her phone would. One day, I managed to get her to hand over the laptop, apparently without any suspicion. The problem? I found nothing. There wasn't a single suspicious person in her messages. And trust me, I went deep through the messages of people who were unfamiliar to me. I checked her Facebook too, but I couldn't check her Instagram because it wasn't logged in on her computer. Honestly, there didn't seem to be anything amiss. The only thing of note was that she seemed to talk quite often with a guy called Ryan, but I dug through her messages and found nothing even remotely inappropriate. Was I overthinking things? Maybe everything was too clean? Maybe she got rid of anything inappropriate between her and this Ryan person? The thing was, I knew there was no way for me to prove my theory unless she slipped up. So for the time being, I decided to just keep observing. Part of me was really hoping to be proven wrong. I didn't know if I could take the heartbreak of being on the cusp of becoming a father and having that taken from me. I was scared of what I'd become if it happened. I desperately hoped it wouldn't. But the doubts kept eating away at me. The uncertainty of the entire situation was driving me mad. I'm the kind of person who, when feeling like there's even a 10% probability of something being a lie, starts to get paranoid and overanalyze until I can get a solid answer. At this point, once I had started to doubt that the child was mine, things began to spiral. I'd blame my friend who first suggested the scenario, but most people I spoke to agreed with his assessment. So I suppose I was just too blind to see it myself. After weeks of inner turmoil, I ended up talking with Sarah about the situation again. I knew it could potentially end horribly, so I started the entire conversation trying to paint my emotions in a way where she'd understand that I wasn't accusing her outright. I just needed reassurance. At this point, verbal reassurance wasn't enough for me. I needed conclusive evidence so I could go back to living my life normally. So I asked her to do a DNA test. Big. Flipping. Mistake. We sat in the living room as I explained everything. To her credit, she quietly listened and didn't explode like the last time. Then I suggested that she'd go for a prenatal DNA test. I had done some reading and realized that we didn't even need to wait for the baby to be born. All it would take was a blood sample, and we could know for certain whether I was the father. She listened in absolute silence and didn't say a word until I asked, "What do you think?" "Yeah." It didn't go well. She simply stood up without a word and went into our bedroom. From the sounds of things, I knew that she was packing clothes. A DNA test is probably never going to be an easy thing for a man to ask a woman to get. I don't know whether there's a trick to it, but I suppose a happy marriage might be shaken heavily by a paternity test request. I get it, but I wish she understood where I was coming from too. I simply needed to be reassured. It seemed like the only way to stop me from going crazy, because I was about to have my first child after waiting for so freaking long, and the sudden success had me so concerned that I know how stupid it sounds and how unfair it is to her. But that means that there was no way for me to get what I really wanted after so long without becoming suspicious. Maybe things just finally clicked and all the stars were aligned right. But I still needed the reassurance that I know it makes me an insecure guy. I've told myself that already. She eventually left the house. I tried to stop her, but she just wordlessly held a hand in my face, and I let her go. I felt so defeated because even an idiot could have told you that conversation wouldn't have ended well. But it was such an impulsive thing. I couldn't help myself. Anyway, she walked out on me and stopped picking up my phone calls. It was a week before I had any idea where she was. I finally managed to speak to her sister, with whom Sarah was staying, so I at least knew she was fine. Her entire family hated me now and spent every opportunity cursing me out. The part that hurt the most was that I was finally about to have a baby, and I had soured the entire experience. Then came the text message I had been dreading. She told me that she wanted a divorce. I didn't have the guts to reply immediately. I was in no rush to pursue that, and I doubted I was going to be served with papers anytime soon, at least not before the baby was born. That would be the last thing you'd want to waste money on with a baby on the way to. So yeah, if you were hoping for an update where I came out justified and validated, having realized she was cheating on me with her fitness instructor or something, this wasn't one of those stories. All I could really say was that the moral of the story seemed to be, think before you do rash things like I did. Or maybe try and find other means to find the truth. When I didn't see anything suspicious on her devices, maybe I should have known there was nothing to be found. But that wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. My wife and I remained separated until the baby was born. It was very bittersweet for me because I was so overjoyed to finally have my baby in my arms. But I knew that custody issues would soon become a problem because the divorce was eventually going to happen. I also hated the fact that I had always wanted to give my child an amazing, wholesome family, but things were going to be split from the very start. That part felt like absolute crap. However, there was a bit of a truce in the early stages, and I was able to come and see my daughter any time that I wanted to, which I really appreciated. She was so beautiful, and I really think that there's nothing quite like the feeling of holding your first child in your arms. My wife and I never really discussed the situation with one another, but I sort of felt like it was hanging in the air. I guessed it was going to come up eventually when the euphoria of our child wore off. I think it was when our daughter was about to turn 1 that Sarah eventually served me with divorce papers. Honestly, it came out of nowhere. The topic had never come back up for discussion. It felt like she waited until a moment when I was feeling at peace and off guard before she hit me with that. And it was brutal. I don't know if I can express how much it hurts to know that you won't be in the life of a child that you desired so badly as much as you want to be. Imagine needing to fight over holidays and weekends and all that kind of crap. I was not looking forward to that at all, and I was imagining the effect that it was potentially going to have on my daughter at some point. But here's where things changed. I had taken a passive role in taking care of my daughter because simply setting foot in my sister-in-law's house where Sarah and my daughter were living always had me being treated like a serial killer. Everyone was always so hostile towards me and I felt like I deserved it. But it honestly was not easy for me to deal with it all. I still powered through all of that because I needed to see my girl, and that was what mattered to me more than anything else. Fortunately for me, there came a weekend where Sarah wanted to attend a wedding in a nearby city, and I volunteered to have my daughter stay with me for the day. Sarah fought against it pretty hard, but since her sister would be going to the same wedding, they knew it was convenient to keep her with me. I wasn't going to kidnap her or do anything rash, so they eventually gave in to my request. This was the first time I had been left alone for an extended period with my daughter. As I looked at her, all my overthinking came back to me. I thought of my stupid paranoia that got me and my daughter in this position in the first place, and then it suddenly clicked. I realized that I could get conclusive proof of whether the girl was my daughter or not. At this point, I fought in my head for about an hour about whether I should head to a clinic to get a paternity test done. But I realized in the end that it was the only way to put my worries to rest. I got in the car and headed straight to a clinic. When I got there, they made it clear that the results would be merely informational, they wouldn't be legally admissible. But that was fine by me. I was simply using the results to put my own head to rest. I showed ID, had a cheek swab done for both myself and my daughter, and when the process was over, I was told it would take about a week for me to get the results. My daughter eventually went back to her mother the next day when Sarah returned from the wedding. But honestly, that 1 week waiting for the results was absolutely brutal for me. I felt like I was going to lose my mind, and I called the clinic on 2 occasions before the week had passed to ask if the results were ready. I knew that this was the one thing that would finally put everything to bed. And if the paternity test was confirmed positive, I would know that I deserved everything I got for doubting my wife. In fact, I was ready to beg her to take me back. I wouldn't have had any pride at that point. Eventually, the results were ready, and I went to pick them up. It was negative. I wasn't the father. It's hard for me to express the way I felt holding that paper in my hands. I was awake, but it was like my body had stopped working. I couldn't react in any way. I was processing very complex emotions because, think of it like this, I realized that all the victimization that I had gone through was unjust. I was right all along. I had reasons to be suspicious, as weak as they might have seemed. But did the strength of my suspicion matter when I was right in the end? I had been gaslighted by a woman I loved and trusted for 15 years. My in-laws had treated me like a villain. I had played a sideline role in my daughter's first year of life, but that's when it hit me. This really wasn't just about my wife and me. The girl that I considered my daughter wasn't mine. I had lost myself in being proven right that it took a minute or two for the weight of the betrayal to hit me. I didn't have a daughter. The girl wasn't my daughter. I had wanted a child incredibly badly, and the child that I was overjoyed to have wasn't mine. Yes, I realized that if my wife was able to get pregnant with another man's baby, I might have been the problem all along. But even if I can't find the happiness I was looking for because of something out of my control, it doesn't mean that I deserve the pain of having the joy of my own child snatched from me through deception. I got home and I cried my eyes out. I drank to shut out the pain, and I don't think I've ever had as much to drink. It was terrible. I was a shut-in for about a week. I really don't know how to put into words the way I felt at that moment. I kept thinking very dark thoughts about my wife. I wanted all the negative emotions to be taken out on her. I don't think you can blame me after such a revelation. It was a lot to process. Anyway, let me skip the woe is me garbage. I contacted a divorce lawyer, which I hadn't done despite being served with papers for quite some time at that point. I was really dragging my feet on signing the papers, and it had almost been a month. But I decided to get serious now because vindication was the only thing I had left. As for the girl I had thought was my daughter, I really didn't know how to proceed. Should I remain in her life? I had fallen in love with her, and while many of you might say there's no point in raising another man's child, it really is easier said than done when you formed that bond. When it was time to get into the divorce proceedings, I already knew things weren't going to be easy. My wife and her lawyer must have thought they'd be presenting me as an insecure man who accused his wife of cheating multiple times without cause. But they had no idea that I had something up my sleeve. My lawyer submitted a petition to the court for a legal paternity test to be done, and I saw my wife freeze on hearing that. Her face will forever be frozen in my mind, and it made me incredibly happy to see that, especially when my lawyer gave a little hint that an informational test might have been done prior to lead to this request. The look my wife gave me was like she wanted to leap across the table and throttle me. All I could do in that moment was smile at her because I felt like I had won. To be honest, I was in the kind of situation where I couldn't truly win, but this was the best I could get. Seeing her know that I knew the truth, her lawyer tried to fight the request, but only so much. Because if you're so confident that you weren't sleeping around, there wouldn't be any reason to so vehemently fight a paternity test request. She gave her consent, and so did I. Eventually, our daughter was taken for a sample to be collected, and another sample was taken from me at an accredited facility. Needless to say, the results were the same. I wasn't the father. It hurt almost as much as the first time because I had secretly hoped that the test was going to show something different. She literally could not meet my eyes after that point. After everything, all the gaslighting, being made to feel like a crappy partner for accusing her of infidelity, I was clearly very right to be suspicious. The divorce filing was just a continuation of her gaslighting, probably to cover up her tracks. Well, it was going to come anyway with this revelation, so I guess the head start didn't hurt. There were more than enough text messages from me showing how she had nearly made me lose my mind, calling me crazy and insulting me for accusing her of being unfaithful. I had the texts from all of my in-laws too. I was turned into some kind of pariah, but now it was clear that I didn't deserve to go through all of that. The judgment at the end of everything, absolutely nothing for her. The judge was very sympathetic and said that if the child had been mine, he likely would have awarded at least child support. But I had no legal responsibility for the girl, and he couldn't do anything that would seem to potentially reward such deceptive behavior. I was tempted to let Sarah keep the car that she had, which was in my name, but I really couldn't do that. Not after everything she had put me through. She had family, they'd support her. But this was a woman who now had no house, no car to her name, nothing substantial in the form of finances, and a baby who wasn't mine. Things were suddenly a lot less cushy than they had been during our marriage. As for the girl I thought was my daughter, she was nearly 2 years old by the time everything concluded. It wasn't a decision I took lightly, but I had to let her go. It hurt like hell, and it still does, thinking of how I was betrayed into finally thinking that I had the child I desired so much, but I realized that her remaining in my life would be a constant reminder of that pain, even if I chose to adopt her as my own. I know there might be a lot of people who disagree with me doing this, but the child's real father is out there somewhere, and hopefully he'll step up to the plate. I've never figured out who she had the child with. I kind of assume it was the Ryan guy I saw her texting with, but I can never be sure, and I am eager to close that chapter of my life. Once the divorce was finalized, I made sure to send an image of the paternity test to every single person who knew my ex-wife closely, and I added a very tasteful text message for all of the in-laws who had come for my throat. Honestly, I'm glad that everything is over now. I don't feel like I really won, but I'm glad to come out on the other end of everything having proven myself right. I didn't have to live a life that was a lie, and perhaps I can find someone who will be a lot better for me in the end. Who knows, there is a certain satisfaction in knowing that my ex-wife will basically be starting her life from square one, but I think she deserves that. In fact, I think she's getting off mildly. I wish there was more justice for what she put me through, but there's a kid in the mix now. And as much as I want to detach from this situation entirely, I don't want an innocent child to get caught in the middle of things. A big thank you to everyone for listening to my story. I'm glad to be at the end of this journey, and all I can say is to always trust your gut when something seems off. It isn't really worth beating yourself up when you feel like you might be right. I'm glad I followed my instincts because I finally feel free now, and it's the first time I felt even a little bit good in a long time. After a year of emotional gymnastics and a decade of trying to become a father, I'm starting over. But at least I'm doing it with the truth on my side. If you've been through something similar or have thoughts about my story, I'd love to hear them in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories like mine. Sometimes the truth is more devastating than fiction, but it's always better to know than to live a lie.
The day I discovered my wife was sleeping with my business partner was also the day I realized I'd built my own prison, brick by brick, for 10 long years. I wasn't even surprised, really. Just numb. The kind of numb that settles into your bones when you finally see the truth that's been hiding in plain sight. My name is Daniel, and this is the story of how I lost everything I thought mattered, only to find something far more valuable: myself. Hey Dan, can you look at the server issue? The site's loading slow again. Rachel's voice drifted from her office correction. Her corner office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle. Already on it, I called back, not looking up from my monitor. Always already on it. For 10 years. 10 years of, hey Dan, can you fix this? 10 years of, we need this ASAP. 10 years of being the technical backbone of Horizon Digital Marketing, the company that had become Seattle's darling of the digital space. The company that bore her name on the incorporation papers, not mine. It was never supposed to be this way. When we met in our MBA program, Rachel was brilliant, but technically illiterate. I was the coder who could bring her marketing visions to life. We fell in love over late-night strategy sessions and dawn coffee runs. When we graduated, launching our own agency seemed inevitable. Our agency. Funny how words shift their meaning over time. The server should be fine now, I said, appearing at her door. Migrated everything to the new cloud instance I was telling you about last week. Rachel barely looked up, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Great. Listen, I need the MediSync proposal by tomorrow morning. Mark wants to review it before the client meeting. Mark. Of course. Mark Chen had joined the company 3 years ago. Smooth-talking, Harvard MBA with connections that opened doors we'd been knocking on for years. Rachel brought him in as a partner, diluting my unofficial stake even further. I say unofficial because, well, that's another part of this story. I'll have it ready, I nodded, lingering at the doorway. Rachel's office was a testament to her success awards lining the walls, the custom desk I'd built her for our 5th anniversary, photos from industry events where she was always center stage. I searched for pictures of us, finding only one, tucked behind her monitor, almost hidden, from our honeymoon in Thailand, before Horizon, before everything. Was there something else? Rachel asked, finally looking up, her expression a mixture of impatience and distraction. I wanted to say, yes, there's something else. There's us. Remember us? Instead, I just shook my head and returned to my windowless office down the hall. That night, I stayed late. Again. The MediSync proposal needed finessing, and I wanted to run some performance tests on the server migration. Rachel texted around 7 p.m. Working late with Mark on the Beaumont pitch. Don't wait up. I sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Our communication had devolved to symbols and shorthand. 10 years of marriage, reduced to digital hieroglyphics. By 10 p.m., I was the only one left in the office. The cleaning crew had come and gone, nodding to me with the familiarity of people who regularly witness my late nights. I stretched, my back cracking in protest, and decided to grab Rachel's external hard drive. She kept all our legacy client files there, and I needed some reference materials for the proposal. Her office was dark when I entered, the Seattle skyline twinkling through the windows. I found the hard drive in her desk drawer, but as I was closing it, something caught my eye. A hotel keycard, tucked beneath some papers. The Archer Hotel. Not remarkable in itself, we often got rooms for clients or for ourselves during late work nights. But something made me pause. A feeling. The kind that starts in your gut and crawls up your spine. I should have left then. Should have taken the hard drive and walked away. But 10 years of suppressed questions have a way of demanding answers at the worst possible moments. I took out my phone and opened our shared location app, something we'd set up years ago for safety. Rachel's dot glowed not at the office where she said she was working with Mark, but 8 blocks away, at the Archer Hotel. My hands moved without my brain's permission, picking up the keycard. Room 1217. The number stared back at me, taunting. I don't remember leaving the office. Don't remember the 8-block walk through downtown. Don't remember taking the elevator to the 12th floor. But I remember standing in front of room 1217, the keycard heavy in my hand like a lead weight. I didn't use it. Didn't need to. The sounds from inside were unmistakable. Rachel's laugh, that specific one she reserved for moments of genuine joy. A sound I hadn't heard directed at me in years. Mark's low murmur. Then, other sounds. Intimate sounds. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, my entire body cold despite the warm hotel corridor. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of building her dream. 10 years of us. Or so I thought. I left the keycard on the floor outside the door and walked away. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, eyes burning from lack of sleep, but mind strangely clear. Rachel came in around 9, wearing yesterday's clothes with a fresh blouse, a change she kept at the office for emergencies. Her hair was wet from a recent shower. "Morning," she said breezily. "Is the MediSync proposal ready?" "On your desk," I replied, not looking up from my monitor. "You're the best." She squeezed my shoulder as she passed. Her touch felt like acid on my skin. Mark arrived 30 minutes later, nodding at me with that easy confidence of his. "Daniel, early bird gets the worm, huh?" I smiled tightly. Something like that. The day proceeded with excruciating normality. The three of us met about MediSync. Rachel presented my work as partly hers, as usual. Mark added strategic insights that, I had to admit, were valuable. We functioned like a well-oiled machine, the technical genius, the marketing visionary, and the connected closer. Except now I knew what happened when the office lights went out. Over lunch, which I ate alone at my desk, I began to think. Not with the hot rage you might expect, but with a cold, calculating precision that surprised even me. I thought about our company structure, about the digital architecture I'd built that kept everything running, about the informal arrangements that had governed our business from the start. You see, when we founded Horizon, Rachel insisted on keeping things simple. She would be the official owner and CEO. I would be, well, not quite defined. Technically, I was an employee, a highly paid one, but an employee nonetheless. "It's just paperwork," she'd said. "We're partners in every way that matters." I believed her. I believed in us. But as I sat there, picking at my sad desk salad, another truth settled in beside the infidelity. I had built an empire that I didn't own. Every client website lived on servers I managed. Every piece of custom software bore my code. Every automated marketing system operated on my architecture. I had the keys to the kingdom, but the kingdom didn't belong to me. An idea began to form in my mind. Not revenge, exactly. More like redistribution, rebalancing the scales that had been tipped against me for a decade. I opened my computer and began to work. For the next 3 weeks, I was the model employee. Arrived early, stayed late, solved problems before they arose, even laughed at Mark's terrible jokes during staff meetings. Meanwhile, Rachel and Mark grew careless, lingering touches in the office, inside jokes I wasn't part of. Once I came back from lunch early and found them emerging from the supply closet, clothing slightly askew. I said nothing, did nothing, just smiled and asked if we had any more printer paper. At night, I executed my plan. First, I documented everything, every line of code I'd written, every system I'd built, every client I'd personally cultivated. I copied all client files to an encrypted drive, not to use, just to have. Next, I registered a new domain, redirectdigital.com, close enough to Horizon to feel familiar, different enough to be legally distinct. Then came the technical steps. I modified our client management system to tag accounts I had personally established relationships with. I updated the DNS settings for our web hosting, implementing subtle changes that wouldn't activate until I wanted them to. Most importantly, I examined our contracts, the ones Rachel had always handled. What I found confirmed what I'd suspected for years. Most were legally sloppy. While Horizon owned the client relationships on paper, many contracts had termination clauses that were never updated from our early days when we were desperate for business. The most critical discovery came when I checked the domain registration for horizondigitalmarketing.com. In our early scramble to launch, I had registered it under my personal account. Rachel had asked me to transfer it to the company multiple times over the years. I had always meant to get around to it. I never did. I worked methodically, dispassionately. This wasn't about hurting Rachel or Mark. This was about survival, about finally claiming what I'd built. The final piece fell into place when I found the password list. Rachel, despite my years of warnings, kept all her passwords in a text file on her laptop. Admin credentials, banking information, client portals, everything. I didn't need most of it, but there was something poetic about her carelessness being the final key. On a Friday afternoon, exactly 1 month after the hotel incident, I submitted my resignation letter. 2 weeks' notice, professionally worded, citing a desire to explore new opportunities. Rachel was shocked. Mark was suspiciously supportive. "Is there anything we can do to change your mind?" Rachel asked, her voice carrying a note of panic I hadn't expected. Not because she valued me, I realized, but because she feared the inconvenience. "It's just time for a change," I said calmly. "I'll document everything and ensure a smooth transition." That weekend, Rachel called an emergency meeting with Mark. I wasn't invited, but I knew about it from the calendar alert that popped up on my phone, another shared system she'd forgotten about. On Monday, Rachel approached me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dan, we've been thinking. Instead of leaving, how about a promotion? Chief Technology Officer, official partner status, 20% equity stake." Too little, too late. 10 years too late. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I've already signed a lease on a new office space." Her smile faltered. "Your own business. What will you be doing?" I met her eyes directly. "Digital marketing." The color drained from her face. My last day at Horizon was surprisingly emotional, but not in the way I expected. The staff designers, developers, account managers, people I'd worked alongside for years, threw me a going-away party. They gave speeches about my mentorship, my patience, my willingness to solve any problem. Rachel stood in the corner, champagne glass in hand, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mark was conspicuously absent, supposedly at a client meeting. After the party, as I packed my personal belongings, Rachel appeared at my office door. "You're really doing this," she said. Not a question. I nodded, wrapping my code books in bubble wrap. "We had something good here, Dan. We built something great." I built something great, I thought. But I said, "Yes, we did." She stepped closer. "Remember when we used to work until dawn, just the two of us? When we landed the Sun West account and danced on this very desk?" I remembered. I remembered everything. That was the problem. "Things change, Rachel. They don't have to," she said, her voice dropping to that intimate tone I once couldn't resist. "Mark is a mistake, a distraction. It didn't mean anything." I looked at her then, really looked at her, the woman I had loved for a decade, the woman I had helped build an empire for, the woman who had taken everything I offered and still wanted more. "Goodbye, Rachel," I said quietly, picking up my box of belongings. As I walked out of Horizon's glass doors for the last time, I felt 10 years of weight lifting from my shoulders. The real work was about to begin. At precisely midnight on Sunday, 2 days after my departure from Horizon, I executed the final step of my plan. One by one, I activated the changes I'd implemented. I changed the administrative passwords for our client management system. I transferred the horizondigitalmarketing.com domain registration to a new account. I redirected the company email servers to my new infrastructure. I activated the DNS changes that would slowly take effect over the next 24 hours. I sent personalized emails to the 37 clients I had directly serviced over the years, announcing my new venture and offering a seamless transition with 3 months of service at half their current rate. Then I went to bed and slept better than I had in years. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Rachel had called 17 times. Mark, 12. The company Slack channel was in chaos. No one could access the client systems. The website was redirecting to a coming soon page. Client emails were bouncing. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I drove to my new office, a modest space in a converted warehouse where 3 former Horizon employees, who had quietly accepted positions with me, were waiting. By noon, we had confirmed that 22 of my targeted clients wanted to move their business to Redirect Digital. By the end of the week, that number had grown to 31. Rachel's lawyer called on Wednesday. I referred him to my lawyer, a step I had taken 6 weeks earlier. The domain name, legally registered to me personally. The client relationships, according to our sloppily written contracts, clients were free to work with whomever they chose. The code I'd written, work for hire, was never properly documented in my employment agreement. Had I technically broken some laws? Possibly. Had I strategically exploited the same gaps in our business structure that had kept me sidelined for a decade? Absolutely. On Friday evening, as my new team celebrated our successful launch, I received a text from Rachel. "We need to talk." I replied simply, "Email my assistant to schedule a meeting." 3 months later, Redirect Digital had 46 clients, 15 employees, and a profitable first quarter. Horizon Digital Marketing still existed, but as a shadow of its former self. Rachel and Mark managed to retain some clients through their personal connections, but the infrastructure they relied on, the infrastructure I had built, was gone. I saw them once, at an industry event. They were together officially now, presenting a united front. Rachel looked tired. Mark, anxious. They both avoided eye contact with me. As I stood at the bar, nursing a whiskey, a familiar face appeared beside me, Tessa, Rachel's former assistant. "You know what she says about you?" Tessa asked without preamble. I shook my head. "She says you betrayed her, that you stole everything she built." I couldn't help but laugh. "Is that what she believes?" Tessa shrugged. "That's what she tells everyone. But those of us who were there, we know the truth." "And what's that?" I asked, curious despite myself. Tessa looked me directly in the eye. "That you finally claimed what was always yours." It's been a year now since I walked out of Horizon's doors. Redirect Digital has become one of the fastest-growing agencies in the Pacific Northwest. I've implemented a partnership model that gives every employee equity after 2 years. Our client retention rate is 94%. I ran into Mark last week at a coffee shop. He looked smaller somehow, less confident. "I heard Rachel's moving to Chicago," he said awkwardly. "Fresh start. Good for her," I replied, and meant it. "For what it's worth," he added, not meeting my eyes, "I know what we did was wrong." I considered his words. Considered the decade I spent building someone else's dream. Considered the nights I lay awake wondering what I had done wrong in my marriage. Considered the quiet revenge I had executed with clinical precision. "You know what, Mark? It doesn't matter anymore. None of it does." And as I walked away, I realized it was true. The betrayal, the hurt, the anger, they had served their purpose. They had freed me from a prison of my own making. Some people say success is the best revenge. I disagree. The best revenge is freedom. The freedom to build something that truly belongs to you. the freedom to define your own worth, the freedom to walk away from people who don't value what you bring to the table. Sometimes, the quietest redirects cause the most dramatic changes in traffic. If you've ever built something for someone who didn't appreciate its value, if you've ever given your heart to someone who treated it carelessly, if you've ever found yourself at a crossroads between what's easy and what's right, I hope this story resonates with you. Life is too short to build other people's dreams at the expense of your own. I'd love to hear your stories of professional or personal betrayal and how you handled it. Have you ever had to start over? Did you find yourself stronger for the experience? Share in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that explore the complicated intersection of work,